All right, it looks like it is 10. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Consumer Protection Relations and Public and Outreach Committee meeting. This meeting is available via teleconference. Individuals listening to the meeting will have an opportunity to provide public comment and will be assisted by a moderator who will be facilitating the teleconferencing process. For those members of the public participating via teleconference, please wait until the moderator has introduced you before you make your comments. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes per agenda item. The committee welcomes public comment on any item on the agenda, and it is the committee's intent to ask for public comment prior to taking action on any agenda item. If for some reason I forget to ask for public comment on an agenda item and you wish to speak on that item, please raise your hand and you will be recognized. Today's meeting will be run according to the Open Meeting Act as required by law. We plan to end today by 12 p.m. And I'd like to introduce Executive Officer Gregory Pruden.
Just say good morning and welcome everybody to today's committee meeting.
Thank you, Greg. Now I would like to call the meeting to order and take roll call. And I can go ahead and do that, or
why don't you go ahead and do that, Chair Linden?
Okay. Okay. Member Dr. Garcia?
Present.
Member Kleppa?
Present.
Member Sims?
Present.
And Member Linden is present. So we have all members here and we have a quorum. Okay, let's move to agenda item 2, public comments on items not on the agenda. The committee welcomes public comment on any item not on the agenda. The committee will extend 3 minutes to any speaker to speak on any topic that is not already before the board for discussion today. Are there any members of the public who wish to offer comment?
Chair Linden, I am located at the publicly noticed location as listed on the agenda. There are no members of the public at the location where I am.
Okay, thank you. And can the moderator check to see if there's anybody
online? Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we are going to accept public comment for items not on the agenda via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of your screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. As noted, you will be given 3 minutes to speak, and I'll give you a 30-second warning before your time expires. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, please. Okay. So let's move to agenda item number 3, which is a discussion and possible approval of the February 18th, 2022 Consumer Protection and Outreach draft meeting minutes. And do any members have any additions or corrections to the meeting minutes?
I have a question. Is there anyone currently on the committee who is at this meeting?
I believe there was only one member present for these minutes that is on the committee today.
Okay, because I would defer to that individual to make sure everything is accurate, as I was not present.
Yes, a member Garcia here. So I will move to accept the minutes as written. They are accurate.
Okay.
I can second that motion.
Okay. So a motion made by Dr. Garcia and seconded by Member Kleppa. Okay. And is there any public comment from those in the audience, or is there still no one in the audience at the public location?
For protocol purposes, every time we go to public comment, I will chime in on this point to say whether there is or is not anybody of the public located where I am, and there are, at this moment, there is still no members of the public present at the physical location.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments from those joining us online?
For our online participants, we are open for public comment on the meeting minutes. If you'd like to make a comment, raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of your screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the motion?
Yes, please. Okay, so let's take a roll call vote on approving these meeting minutes. Dr. Garcia,
I vote aye.
Member Kleppa,
Aye.
Member Sims,
Aye.
and Member Linden, aye. So that motion passes. Okay, that brings us to our next agenda item, which is a presentation. Oh, let's see.
It should be number 4. There we go.
Okay. A presentation from Dr. Doug Major representing the Children's Vision Now Coalition. And just want to give a thank you to staff for putting together a history of this issue for the committee with links to prior efforts and initiatives undertaken by the Optometry Board. Included in the information was a link to the board's public service video advocating for comprehensive vision exams and a prior presentation from Dr. Doug Major to the board, which was given in 2022. The committee will now receive information from Dr. Doug Major, who is joining us via phone. And I believe he is on, so good morning, Dr. Major.
This is the moderator. We have Dr. Major connected in part, but at the moment we don't see any connection for audio or visual. So bear with us just a moment.
Okay.
In fact, I am going to put something on screen that hopefully will help. It looks like he may have dialed in or connected via a smart device just because I don't have a phone number. But
And we can take certainly let's take a few moments here to do what we can to see what we can assist in terms of technological connections and so on and so forth. If we need to, Dr. Major did send me some of his comments, and I'd be happy to read those into the record if for some reason we're not able to connect. So I just would offer that up. But yeah, let's spend a few moments trying to figure out how we can make this work.
this is the moderator. I show that Dr. Major's connected video. Don't yet see him, but we still don't have a microphone connected. Nor do I have an indication as to what kind of device he's connected to us with.
Do we have any way to contact him outside of this platform to let him know the issues we're having?
Yeah, I have Dr. Major's cell phone number, and I can send him a message right now.
Please let him know that he has the ability to call in if all we're looking for is an audio connection.
Okay.
Perhaps dialing in might be the easiest.
I will send that information over as well.
And I will make sure that you have the phone number.
I'm going to go on. I might be getting a call from him at the moment. Give me a second.
Oh, I see a phone symbol.
That's good news. Now we know he's connected by a mobile device and he might have a microphone connected.
I think
Okay.
he's in.
Yeah.
All right, Dr. Major, I'm sending you a request to unmute your microphone. Since you're on a mobile device, you may need to hit the ellipses button, that dot 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 at the bottom of your screen, in order to find the right. Looks like you've unmuted.
I assume Dr. Major is attempting to say something, but please speak up if you can, because you should be unmuted, but we're not hearing anything at the moment.
Do we know if he's trying to connect through a computer or a phone or what device?
Dr. Major?
Oh,
Dr. Major is definitely connected by a mobile device
okay.
and was unmuted for a moment,
Hmm.
but is back on mute.
Yeah, these platforms are fun to use.
Sometimes.
I just got off the horn with Dr. Major. We're showing him connected, but it sounds like he's going to try to reconnect via the call in and the phone. So we'll just maybe hang tight for another moment or two. Just remember, Clepa said technology is always fun.
Considering our time constraints today, would it be prudent to do another agenda item while we try and connect Dr. Major?
I don't think so, David. I think we're going to be quite okay on time. We've offered till noon for this meeting, and I don't think this item or the next item is going to take an hour and 45 more minutes. So, but we will see.
Understood.
While we're waiting, are we able to discuss any other matter that isn't on the agenda, or is that barred by law?
You are barred by law.
Okay, thought I'd ask.
Can we chat generally about like children's vision while we're waiting, or?
Let me check the agenda item and how it's written quickly.
While Brennan's doing that, I mean, I think it's safe to, we have an agenda item we're talking about, which is
Yeah.
item 4, presentation from Dr. Doug Major representing the Children's Vision Now Coalition. And we do have a staff memo that has been put together that's in your packet that Chair Linden introduced at the top of this item. And I can safely just talk a little bit about what that memo says. I think, is that okay, Council?
I'm okay with that.
So while we're waiting for Dr. Major, let's just do that. And Dr. Major, if he's able to chime in, can unmute himself and chime in at any moment, and I'll stop. If for some reason he's not able to join us, as I mentioned, he did email me some of his remarks, so I can, if council's okay with it, I could read that into the record perhaps. But let's just go ahead and let me maybe sort of introduce this issue for the especially the newer committee members. So children's vision has been a topic and an issue that this committee and this board has engaged for about a decade at this point. As you see in your packet, some history of this issue. Comprehensive eye exams are not required upon enrollment in public school in California. Instead, what has to happen under the law is a vision screening. And that vision screening is often done by a school nurse or other authorized person. It may not be done by an optometrist. It may not be done by an ophthalmologist. Vision screenings are not comprehensive eye exams, and so they may not catch all eye conditions. Children can go many years in school with vision problems that go undetected and undiscovered because they haven't been afforded or given a comprehensive eye exam. So this board and this committee has cared a lot about this issue. Nearly a decade ago, there was a bill, SB 402, that was proposed and sponsored by the board that would have required comprehensive eye examinations. That bill, SB 402, was not successful. It had some quite significant costs. I believe the materials that we put together for you have some of that information. The cost was in the many multiples of millions, and so the bill died and did not go anywhere. The committee and the board was not deterred by that initial effort, and what came out of that initial effort in 2015 was a children's vision work group and another effort legislatively, which was AB 1110. This bill was, again, trying to highlight the importance of comprehensive eye exams for school-aged children. And the Children's Vision Work Group held many meetings, engaged in a press conference, put together outreach and education materials to help sort of underline and underscore the importance of this issue. However, that bill also did not succeed. This was in 2017, 2018, and the work group, the Children's Vision Work Group of the board, has not met really since that time. The board did engage, in your packet includes links to these efforts, a PSA, a public service sort of announcement video, children's vision screenings. We put together an article and a couple brochures, and we've tried to stay engaged in the topic by having periodic presentations from Dr. Doug Major, representing the Children's Vision Now Coalition. So that's
and I'm Greg.
The brief history of the issue, and it sounds like Dr. Major may have just joined us.
Good timing.
Right.
Yeah. And excuse me again, I'm at the San Luis Obispo County Jail, so they didn't let me out. So I apologize. Are you hearing me okay?
You're outside. You're not calling from the inside.
Yeah. Well, they let me out for a second to make this call.
We're hearing you
so
fine,
thank you
Dr.
so much.
Major. There's a little bit of feedback on your end, but we're hearing you, I think, okay, and happy to turn the floor over to you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Greg. And, I appreciate Greg did a great job of doing the history, and that was for all the children of the state. Things have changed a little bit since then. I sent out a flyer that, the majority of the children of the state now are covered by the state of California. The state of California is the biggest provider of children's vision care now, by far, approaching 6 million children. And we put together a coalition of best practice, including from Harvard and pretty much every teaching institution, including optometrists, ophthalmologists, pediatric ophthalmologists, as well as school nurses, because the interesting thing is sort of an easy give. There's no metrics in the system, no surveillance metrics. In the state system, because the majority of children are under that coverage, we need metrics so that we can look at surveillance and actually see if we're improving. Of interesting note, the only metrics that come to the system is through the jail system, believe it or not, because of the issue with children only getting glasses to the jail. Second thing is just recently, our work with Children's Now, we have now been rated as the worst in the nation for access for children's care. And I think that's a big issue. We went ahead and also commissioned College of London. Seems like if you have somebody from the outside has to report it's better to do a needs assessment. The big push of the needs assessment is, again, no metrics. We could go on about all the many, the benefits of trying to get glasses to every child, but we need to get the kids that are under the state's coverage. They're the ones that have the best control that we can help. And we need numbers to make that happen. The numbers have actually been getting worse as there's more and more children. And as somebody that's been doing school screening since the 1980s, it's really sad to see that we have this huge unmet need. And I have nothing against dental care, but the dentists have done a lot better job than us. We need to make sure that this is on the plate. So any questions?
Well, I have a couple if I might. Dr. Major, my name is Robert Klepp. I'm a member of the board. Do you know if there's any current legislation pending to fix this issue?
So part of the issue, there was a one that went through SB 502 through Allen that helped the nonprofit Vision to Learn go ahead and get some funding. So currently we're like a third world country. We have a few great groups that are going out and helping these individuals. That was passed. The other two legislations, SB 1089 and SB 304, were more vending, in other words, vendor issues. So in other words, it would allow doctors to be able to get glasses, not just through the state of California prison system. This would allow parents to be able to go to Walmarts and Costco's on weekends and get their glasses. So currently 304 is sitting in health committee. There's been a lot of pushback from the Department of Healthcare Services because of this marriage that they have with the corrections. So I hope that answers your question. So really is nothing pending. I look at it this way though, this is just basic public health 101 to have metrics in the system. And I sent Greg some information on the MCHAP, the medical children's group that Dr. Pan set up, that shows lots of 3 pages on dental care, nothing on vision. So I'm hoping that we don't necessarily need legislation to legislate just basic care. We might need it, but I hope that answers your question.
It does, thank you.
Member Kleppa and Dr. Major, wanted to clarify something that I misheard it. I think the bill that you're referring to is SB 340, not 304.
Sorry, not 304. Yeah, 340. Yes.
Yeah, and SB 340. Correct. Yeah, and SB 340 is a bill that our board has a position on. We took a support position on SB 340 last year. As Dr. Major said, that bill is stuck in the health committee at the moment. And what SB 340 proposes to do is allow for private labs to produce and make the glasses for Medi-Cal, for children that are on Medi-Cal. Right now and for all time, it has only been allowed for Medi-Cal patients to have their eyeglasses made by by the prisons, not by private labs. There had been some issues around timeliness and quality of those glasses, especially we were in COVID. And so SB 340 is a current bill that would authorize private labs to make these glasses and sort of sever that relationship that's existed for the last couple decades. I do understand we've talked about this bill as a board, that bill is likely not to move forward in its current form and is likely to have future amendments that we don't know at this point what they will look like.
And just to note, Greg, not every county had to use the prison system, and that's what makes unique about the coastal communities, including San Luis Obispo. So we have some great research that shows when the prison system takes over, access to children's care goes down dramatically. And so we sort of have this interesting set that we can see. So coastal counties were forced to go on the system January 1, 2020. Our local group, managed care group, actually self-funded to try to maintain their panel. And then we just see the panels collapse. In San Mateo, highest payroll county in the United States, their county completely collapsed. There was only one person able to do glasses in the whole county of San Mateo after they changed it to the new rule. So we have a great example of what happens when the state's monopoly takes over what private enterprise has done a great job. It's really so we have some really good data on that. But of course, the prison system rules in the state of California.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like children's vision, the issue is so important. The topic is also just very broad. You know, for example, I've just been trying to think about what are some of these issues that we're looking down at, because if you break it down, you know, on one hand, we have the issue with glasses, right? Whether the waits are too long, that's one issue. We have another issue with metrics. As Dr. Major said, you know, on the Medi-Cal dashboard, all of these other markers for children's health have data, and there isn't anything for vision. And I tried to look into it, you know, how come dental has information that's out there? And, you know, it seems like there was a very concerted effort, a dental transformation initiative, among other things, where the state has really focused on that issue. But metrics, you know, that's another issue. Another issue I know that we've heard before, that it seems like there is some traction on now is just that, you know, the provider rates are too low for people to be able to provide, you know, be able to be seen and have access to provider that can meet their vision needs. And also, you know, trying to beef up the exams that we have at schools. You know, as Greg had said, that was something this board has tried before. So I feel like as of now, those are kind of how I've tried to think about it. You know, what are these different ways to broach the topic? Going to the issue of the metrics, because there's other health markers available through DHCS, the Department Dental, the Department of Healthcare Services, the group that kind of oversees Medi-Cal. What is the resistance to including a metric for children's vision or collecting any type of data for it?
It's a very strange thing, and I've had many personal meetings with Michelle Bass, as well as I was really hoping when we had a brand new, you know, public health or population management, you know, department set up, that we would just put that in there. Now, in the 250-page report, that she does mention that they need to put it in there. I just don't understand the pushback. I think there's fear. I think there's some middle management issue going on. And you have to understand, when I first called up there, I thought they would just answer a question. The lawyers called me back, and it was a risk assessment. So as an outsider, I don't care about that. You know, I care about the kids. But I still, after all the things, you know, that we can do, because everything has a cost, this is just basic common sense to say that we include the metrics in the system. And so that's where I sort of put the efforts in more recently. And according to Michelle, you know, they all say yes, but see, the interesting thing is I'm just trying to get on the MCHAP meeting agenda. There's never been one time that they've included vision care, except some bald guy on the public comments section. You know,
I want to pause you just for a second.
Yeah.
In case some of the other members are not familiar with MCHAP, because they might not be familiar that there's kind of this advisory body that also has committee meetings and their own agendas to discuss these issues.
Yeah, and that's, but again, there's not an optometrist on that group, and it's never been an agenda. I'm surprised at the pushback of just having it as an agenda item in that meeting. So, but there are some key people that we're pushing back. They're no longer there. We have an opportunity right now to you know, move ahead. And I think the head, you know, Director Bass seems to be very open. So, but that's a great question. Why it's not included? I think we need to have some, you know, hopefully your group can suggest it as well as others, because we've had, the legislative branches, I counted 600, almost 600 positive votes, no opposition when we go to these vision care issues. It's just the executive side, the executive branch of government. We need to connect with those, and they need to realize this is an important thing if they want to end, help school. I always look at it this way. The interesting with dental care, if they have a problem with teeth, they have to pay for it later. If you don't treat vision care, education, special education pays for it. So that's my, crosses borders. That's why we don't. But that's my feeling. I could talk. You can see I'm excited about this. So I'll be quiet. But great questions. Any other ones?
Well, my last question would be, you indicated that we should advocate for something, but I wanted you to flesh that out. What are you seeking from this board?
I think a request to have data, children's data, as part of the as part of the system or part of MCHAP dashboard. How's that? Just a pretty simple request.
Okay.
I've been getting a lot of that myself, claims data. So the data is there. It really would take somebody that's smart maybe 2 days to put that in there. It's not a cost issue. And so we just want to have the data. You can just request as a board, I just would like this data, and see if they can come up with it. Right. That would be the first step. Pretty easy ask, I think.
I guess this is kind of a question for council and for Greg, but how, I guess logistically speaking, or in terms of what we as a committee or a board can do, how would we be able to move forward with something like that if we were trying to request some information on children's vision data?
My sense, this is Executive Officer Pruden, my sense that at the committee level that we're at right now, any action taken here would be a recommendation to the full board, and then the full board would take it from there. So could we end up in a place where this committee is recommending that we ask for these surveillance measures or metrics, and making that recommendation to the full board, who then would direct staff to do that or not? I think that's certainly one avenue. I'm not sure if council has other thoughts, or if I've completely messed that sort of flow up.
No, that seems pretty accurate to me. I think having a clear recommendation for the board, maybe bringing this up for larger board discussion and going there would probably be a good next step.
Okay, that's good to know.
I think you have the ammunition that Children's Now dashboard says that we're the worst in the nation. We want to find out why we're the worst in the nation, right? I think we have some good things. I have to jump back into my role. Thank you so much for your time, letting me, talk. We have lots of information, and look over we have a great coalition of really smart people that are just waiting to help. Thank you for all of your service, by the way, in the board. Thank you. I'm going to back out if anything else.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Major.
Thank you, Dr. Major.
Thank you, Dr. Major.
I think, Chair Linden and committee members, I think one of the things that we would want to do as staff and as this committee, in terms of if we end up at a place recommending some action to the full board, we've talked about a few other things in this item today that staff and other members may not be very familiar with, like the MCHAT, the dashboard, so on and so forth. What does that look like? What's on there currently? What's not on there currently, so on and so forth. So I think we want to put together a little bit of that additional research, probably build on the materials that we already put together for today. And then we could see what that looks like. But I think certainly that's one pathway, is a recommendation could come out of this committee to take it to the full board, to ultimately down the road be making some sort of ask, or otherwise figuring out how we can engage with this advisory panel on these data types of
Yeah.
questions.
Okay.
It also might make sense for the committee to recommend staff to start to develop this as a topic and provide like an overview to the full board.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah, I feel like the idea of just getting more data seems like it would make sense if you're trying to kind of unpack this issue. Like I haven't done a lot of research into this yet, but I'm curious as well, why like where is the need mostly based in? Is it the fact that even though kids are being screened at schools, I know that that's not a comprehensive eye exam, but is it that even the kids that get flagged for a comprehensive eye exam, is it that they're not getting that subsequent real examination done? Is it because it is the lack of follow through an issue? Is it that once they get told there might be a vision problem, they don't have access to a provider? Is it certain areas where this issue is bigger or not? So yeah, I'm just personally really curious, where are these kind of, where do things kind of bottleneck, and where are some of the, those points, those inflection points that kind of make a big difference to whether kids are getting the care they need or not. Yeah. Does anyone else have any comments or any?
Yeah, this Member Garcia. So I've been listening, and everyone has such great points. I didn't want to really beat a dead horse, but I think Chair Linden, I think you really hit the nail on the head that there are so many variables on why children are not getting care, from access to care because there aren't enough Medi-Cal optometrists or ophthalmologists accepting it. There are reasons of reimbursement, and that is why a lot of optometrists and ophthalmologists don't accept Medi-Cal. There's the whole issue with the eyeglasses and the inefficiencies with the whole system of having glasses made through the prisons, with lockdowns and a whole other host of inefficiencies making glasses. It can take several months to get a pair. So there are a lot of things, but I think, if we're looking at kind of boiling it down to what we can do now, I think getting data will be very helpful, because in the past, through the board and through COA, it's always come down to data that we never really had. So if we could make that ask, and if they aren't collecting that data, to request that, I think it would make legislation going forward easier. It would make the asks through legislation a lot easier if we can show that these things are happening and these children aren't getting access to care for all these different reasons. But I think it's kind of a really huge issue. But if we can start with that, I think it would be helpful. So if we could maybe create a motion to maybe have staff start working on some of these issues and putting it before the full board to take action.
Yeah, I think that sounds great.
And I concur with that, because I do believe that we need to see the data. We also need to make sure that it's presented to the board, and also for them to understand the other people that are involved with that. I believe that MCAT was what it was called, or just providing some of that background to the larger board would be important as well. But we definitely need to see the data, because it appears that even the doctor indicated that, being called the worst in the nation, they want to know why. And so, I mean, we want to know why as well, because maybe that will help them in terms of process improvement, or maybe it will help everyone understand why there's an important need to really look into this and support legislation that is really in the best interest of children. So I agree that we should have a motion to present this to the board, and that our staff should help in preparing that.
And from what I understand, there is some traction around increasing reimbursement rates too, right? I think I had seen something, the governor's budget had mentioned maybe trying to increase rates to what Medicare reimburses. I'm not sure.
Yeah, this is Member Garcia. So that, yeah, that is true. Whether or not that will actually make it through the budget process, we're not quite sure. But currently, the last I heard, that is true, that they're trying to match Medi-Cal rates to Medicare rates here in California. And that's how it is in many states. California's always been really lagging in terms of adjusting reimbursement. It's been flat for the last 30 years or so in eye care anyway. So hopefully at least that will help if it makes it through the budget process this year. Greg may have some more current information on that.
I actually don't. I don't have any information that's more current than what you just stated. Yeah, we're in the middle of that budget process, so we won't know how that budget process shakes out until a few more months from now. I know that is an item that lots of folks are looking at.
Yeah, and I feel like that also kind of makes the need to have those metrics be public even greater too, right? Because if we can kind of track and see how much access improves and how many more people are able to utilize services if reimbursement goes up, then we'll know if they ever go back down or something, right? Like that's a very tangible effect it would have on access to care.
Yeah, I would also clarify, and Dr. Garcia, correct me if I'm wrong here, children have to be covered in California under federal law and state law, I believe. Children have to be covered under Medi-Cal. You're not allowed to refuse to see a Medi-Cal child, a patient who's a child under Medi-Cal. The adult benefit for Medi-Cal is optional and was a benefit that was severed for many years and only brought back, I believe, in 2019, 2020. So children have always been covered. While there's always been access to care issues as it pertains to Medi-Cal, children have to be covered, whereas adults, for a long time, it was an optional benefit.
Yeah, that's correct.
One thing I want to remind members of as they are exploring this issue that the board doesn't have full legislative authority, as you all know. And so that as the board continues down this journey, information gathering is completely fine. But as we get farther to maybe more concrete steps and dissemination, we might want to think about what's within the board's purview and legislative authority to act. And as our primary way of enforcing laws is through regulating the licensees.
Okay.
Council's point, we have paid attention to, but not necessarily advocated for changes, specifically increases in the Medi-Cal reimbursement rate, because that is the purview of the governor and his or her administration to propose, and it's not really our place to make those proposals or otherwise advocate for it. But certainly we know what the issues are, we can talk about them, so on and so forth. So as it pertains to this issue and children's vision, I think we've talked somewhat around what a motion might look like. We don't actually have a motion on the table. So I don't know if we want to try to, flush that out a little bit, put a little more detail and color behind it to help me and help staff know what we need to do to bring to the full board.
Can I make a suggestion in that regard? My thought would be that we would ask staff to gather existing information to help provide metrics both to the board and to outside entities to give them a better understanding of where this issue lay and to give ongoing information to all interested individuals about where this is going. So I think that might be a starting place for such a motion.
Okay.
One of the ways I'm thinking about this, and we've got a decent amount of information in terms of what this committee and board has already engaged on with this topic. Certainly in this agenda item and the materials put together for it, some of that information or a lot of that information is included. I think there's probably some additional information that we've learned and talked a little bit about today regarding MChat, what that existing dashboard looks like, what does it cover, what does it not cover, so on and so forth. Is that the type of information that this committee is thinking about would be helpful and necessary to bring to the full board to help inform the full board about whatever direction they want to go beyond that?
My thought was Dr. Major mentioned a source of information that apparently isn't on MCAT for some reason and is useful in evaluating this area. So that was what I was thinking when I was making my suggestion, that apparently there's some overlooked source of information that is not generally distributed. And maybe that's something we can bring to the fore, both for us and for others to examine.
Yeah, I think he made it sound like the vision care stats exist somewhere, but they're not made available on the website. You know, I'm assuming he meant like the department must have some tracking of that information, but it's not published online.
That was what it sounded like to me. Again, his phone was jumping in and out, but it sounded like there was a source of information that was not generally available. And that would be something I would definitely want staff to research to determine where that information is held, and then maybe bring something to the board so that we can determine how to better distribute that.
That is clarifying. Yeah. So what about a motion that would look like or sound like directing staff to research, gather, explore the issue of children's vision data and Medicare or Medi-Cal, and prepare a presentation for a future board meeting, something along those lines?
Yes, rather than you doing independent research, you would simply be gathering what's already out there and exists.
Okay.
Mr. Kleppa, would you like to make that motion?
Sure. I would just be paraphrasing our executive director, but my motion would be that staff research existing information in the area of children's vision to determine what information exists, what metrics can be developed, and what the board might be able to then use to better determine the state in this area and to better distribute this information for all the groups that would have an interest. That may be a little broader than you intended, Executive Director, but that was my thought. Do you have any suggested changes?
Do you want to direct staff? Sorry, Greg. Do you want to direct staff to present the information at a board meeting?
Yes, so that we determine what the sources are and what the type of information available is, and then we can determine how to use it. Exactly right. Again, it's a little disjointed. Do you need something that's more cohesive?
Yeah, I think if you want to give me a second, or if you feel good about it, essentially just restate the first part of your motion and then add and direct staff to present at a board meeting.
Okay, generally my thought would be to direct staff to research existing data on children's vision from sources currently available and provide a presentation to the board as a whole as to the extent of that data, what it contains, and what our options might be to better present it to the world at large and those who could best use it.
A second.
Let me make sure I got this right for everyone. So the motion would be, I motion to direct staff to research existing information in the area of children's vision care and provide a presentation for a future board meeting, including options to best disseminate the information.
That sounds right to me. Thank you.
Okay.
Great.
And board member Sims seconds.
Great.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion by member Kleppa, seconded by Sims.
I do want to check with the executive director to be sure he doesn't have any questions before we move forward on the motion.
I think that motion is sufficiently clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Should we open it up for public comment?
Yes, I, Executive Officer Greg Pruden, am in the public location noticed on the agenda. There are no members of the public at this location.
Okay. And Mr. Moderator?
We are open for public comment via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment on agenda item 4 of the motion, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the motion?
Yes, please. Okay. Let's see. So we have a motion on the floor from Member Kleppa, seconded by Member Sims, and we'll go ahead and take a roll call vote. Dr. Garcia,
I vote aye.
Member Kleppa,
Aye.
Member Sims,
Aye.
Member Linden, aye. So the motion passes. Okay. Great. And thank you again, Greg, for putting all that information together for the last item. That was very helpful.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we can move on to agenda item 5, discussion and possible action on dry eye syndrome, intense pulsed light, and radio frequency technology. So members, in your materials is a memo prepared by Executive Officer Pruden, who will present this item.
So everybody take a deep breath because we're like totally shifting gears now to a totally different topic from children's vision. Thank you, Chair Linden, and appreciate the quick intro on this item. This is agenda item 5 relating to dry eye syndrome, intense pulse light, and radio frequency technology. We put together a memo that you have in your packet to try to help you understand what dry eye is, and then what these technologies are that are being used to treat this issue. Happy to answer any questions that members may have about dry eye and or IPL or RF. I just want to say quickly in a nutshell that this is this has been an emerging issue and topic over the last couple years. Intense pulse light and radio frequency are not new technologies on the market, but their application to optometry is a different question. Intense pulse light has been legal under both federal and state law since 2021 and 2022. However, our staff research indicates that we can find no such legal approval for radio frequency. Radio frequency is a technology that is being used in the marketplace in California. We see advertisements and other methods of it being offered. As the memo indicates, we have yet to receive any complaints, really any complaints involving dry eye as a topic, but no complaints specific to either IPL or radio frequency. These techniques, IPL and radio frequency, are sometimes used individually. They are also sometimes used in combination to treat a dry eye. And so we wanted to bring this item forward to this committee to start this conversation about dry eye, about the technologies that are used for the treatment of it, and also talk about what the law allows and doesn't allow. Dr. Garcia is the only member of this committee who is a practicing optometrist. And so I think he may have more detail and more information about what dry eye is, how it's treated, and the technologies that are used for it. So with that, I'll stop and entertain any questions and a discussion from the committee.
I also would love to hear from Dr. Garcia on his experience with these two techniques, because obviously he's the only one with possibly direct experience. But I did have a legal question, so I don't know if this is one for the executive director or council. Are these types of procedures ones that can only be used if approved under the law, or can they be used even though there's no express approval?
Council, do you want me to take a stab at it?
Yeah, go ahead. To be honest, from my perspective, I would need to do more fully detailed research into whether or not this is approved underneath our Practice Act. But if Greg knows off the top of his head, I defer to him.
I believe I do know off the top of my head. So The way our law is written in Business and Professions Code, section 3041, and I'm looking at specifically section A5G1 and G2, additional medical devices or technology have two alternative pathways to approval. One is an approval via an indication by the federal government, by the Food and Drug Administration, FDA. This is the avenue that specifically happened for IPL. In 2021, February specifically, the FDA gave an indication, an approval for the intense pulse light device offered by Luminous. It was the first time, I believe in my lifetime, that the FDA had approved a new ophthalmic device specific for the visual system. Coincidentally, because IPL had long had studies and other research and indications showing its promising use for the treatment of dry eye, our board at that time was also engaged in conversations with the legislature to seek a specific statutory authority for IPL in our Practice Act. And that also occurred. That took effect on January 1st of 2022. So in our Practice Act, Business and Professions Code Section 3041, we'll see the explicit authorization for optometrists to use intense pulsed light. As I just mentioned, IPL also received explicit legal authority from the federal government in February of 2021. I mentioned Business and Professions Code Section 3041, A5, G1, and G2, because that is the section of our scope that provides for the alternative pathway via the federal government for additional devices or technology to receive legal authorization. That is the pathway in G1 that IPL received in February of 2021. As I mentioned, just to repeat myself, IPL also has explicit authority in our Practice Act, which occurred in January of 22. Radio frequency technology, the word radio frequency, RF, it never appears in our Practice Act. There is no explicit legal authorization in 3041 or anywhere else in the Practice Act that I'm aware of where frequency is either mentioned or authorized. There is also no authority in our regulation that specifically speaks to its allowance or use. And this is where 3041, Business and Professions Code 3041, A5G2 may come into play. G2 is a permissive statute for the board via regulation to additionally authorize other devices or technology that have a use for the visual system that don't involve surgery. And the other requirement would be if we pursued a regulation to approve any additional devices or technology, in addition to a prohibition on the surgery, which is consistent with our Practice Act, any manufacturer training that may be required for that device or technology would have to be also required as part of our regulation. So as staff sees it via our research, IPL has explicit legal authority both under the federal government and in our specific Practice Act. We are unaware of any specific FDA approval for RF technology for use in the visual system, and we are not aware of any explicit authority in our law or regulation that authorizes RF.
Thank you, by the way, for that very comprehensive overview. I have a slightly different question, though. Do those regulations that you just cited to give any kind of approval by analogy, such that we already have something similar, IPL, such that RF may be approved if it's substantially similar or something like that? Or does the regulation say it has to be exactly as stated, or it can't be used? It has to be RF specifically or not at all? That was kind of what I was wondering.
I'm not aware of any authority anywhere in our law or regulation that makes something authorized because it may be substantially related to something else.
Okay.
So say that RF is not Dr. Garcia can certainly chime in here. Staff's review of this would suggest that RF would not be substantially related to IPL. They're totally different technologies. One uses electricity, one uses light. They are apples to oranges in many ways. But to answer your question specifically, not aware of any language in our laws that say something that may be related to something else or similar to something else has an approval based off of that similarity or other relation.
Thank you.
I'm also not aware of any similar regulations, but I would be happy to do a deeper dive into this and follow up with you at a later point.
Appreciate it, counsel. Thank you.
Yeah, very good questions. This is Member Garcia. So I'll just put out some information, just some basic information about dry eye. I've been treating dry eye for the last 6 years or so using these technologies. But they have been around for a long time, as Greg mentioned. You did a great job, Greg, in giving us a great overview. But these technologies, whether it's IPL, low-level light, radio frequency, they have been around in dermatology for as long as I've been an optometrist. So these are old technologies that have just been relatively recently adopted into the eye care space. It goes back to Dr. Toyos, who was using Luminous, an older IPL, in treating aesthetics. And they were discovering that their dry eye patients that they were treating for aesthetics were finding relief from dry eye. So he did a study, and several studies Dr. Toyos did, and found that there was a direct correlation between IPL treatment and the reduction of dry symptoms, specifically MGD. It's meibomian gland dysfunction. So that's kind of where it all started. And it has been on a very fast track ever since in terms of new technologies, incorporating IPL technology, low-level light, and now radio frequency into the eye care dry eye space. So that's why we're talking about it today, because this is all happening very quickly. I would say in the last 5 years, all of these technologies have been marketed very heavily to optometrists throughout the country and the world. Here in California, some of these technologies, we had to change the laws through legislation to include IPL by name and low-level light by name. But as Greg mentioned, there may be the other option of not going through legislation, but maybe using that G2 option as a board to allow it. So the reason we're looking at it today is because dry eye is extremely common. I would say half of our patient, and in some populations, in some offices, it may be 3/4 of patients that come in on a daily basis have some level of dry eye. And some of you, I'm sure, have dry eye. It can be anything, something as simple as stinging and burning, sandy, gritty feeling, redness of your eyes, fluctuation of vision. These are all, even watering of your eyes, are all dry eye symptoms. So it's very, very common. And that's why you see so many optometrists engaging in these technologies. Going back 5 years ago, really the only thing we had were lubricant eye drops. We had some prescription eye drops like Restasis, or recently something called Xiidra, to try to stimulate more tear production. So those have been helpful, but that really fell very, very short in treating MGD, which is the most common cause of dry eye. So if you can imagine, your tear film has 2 basic layers over your cornea. Your cornea has thousands of nerve endings. It's very sensitive to irritation, but there's 2 layers to your tear film. You have an aqueous layer, which is basically your salt water, your tear, and you have a meibum layer, which is the oil that is secreted from the glands of your eyelids. If you don't have a sufficient oil layer, then that tear film layer is very susceptible to evaporation. Evaporation will happen faster anytime you're around airflow or your blink rate decreases. So if you're around a ceiling fan, the vents in your car, heating and air conditioning, you're on a computer, that accelerates the evaporative process, and it accelerates the dry symptoms. So that's why they're so prominent, so common. So getting to the underlying cause of dry eye, MGD is the greatest cause, more than the aqueous insufficiency element. It's that oil layer. So increasing that oil layer, if you can imagine, those little glands are very, very, very small, and the openings to those glands are very small. If those oils get impacted for too long, then the oil starts to get hard. You can think of it as the old Crisco in the can visualization. If it's in that can of Crisco, you turn it over, the oil can't come out. The only way it'll come out is if you heat it up, melt it, and express it, and make room for fresh oil in those glands. And that will kind of kickstart and stimulate the natural oil production process, which eliminates the symptoms that they were having before, and it decreases your dependence on on medicinal drops or even lubricants. So that's what we're trying to do, is unclog the glands, get the glands working again, so the patient will have more visual comfort going forward. And it's very successful in our practice. We've been doing it for 5 years. You know, we help everybody that we treat. You know, we have to identify the underlying cause, and then we can treat it. In our office, we use intense pulse light. We use something called myothermoflow, which is the thermal treatment, and we use low-level light. You know, without going into all the details, all these technologies are trying to improve the health and function of these glands, but differently. That's where they differ. Intense pulse light, low-level light, RF are trying to unplug these glands using different technologies, whether it's light, thermal heat, but they're all effective, and they've all been proven to be safe. I mean, you can do the research with the FDA in terms of if there were any adverse events. There are very few with all of these technologies. They're very safe. With RF specifically, how does it help with dry eye and MGD? It's a thermal treatment. It's a thermal treatment like many other treatments. So you're warming up the glands, you're melting the oil, and you're expressing the old oil out and making room for fresh oil so the patient can be comfortable going forward. So, you know, in a nutshell, that's basically what all these technologies are trying to do, including radiofrequency.
Dr. Garcia, would you mind if I ask a question just for my information? You indicated the FDA has done studies. Do you know if they've done studies on RF specifically, maybe in the dermatology area, that kind of has some reference to what we're looking at?
Yeah, so all of these technologies, even RF, they're all FDA approved. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to sell them in the US. They're all FDA approved for different things. Radiofrequency doesn't have yet the approval for the indication of the treatment of dry eye, although it's being used to treat dry eye, you know, today in California, widespread, and there's widespread use for it, but there hasn't been yet. But there are studies that have already been done with radiofrequency, just like all the other technologies, that show that it does help with the reduction of dry eye symptoms, and it does help with the treatment of MGD. And that process through the FDA can take, you know, several years to get approval. So I know that the major companies like Luminous and InMode are on track to get that approval. In Canada, they do have the FDA approval for the treatment of dry eye, or radiofrequency does. But you know, here in the US, things take a little bit longer.
So just again,
To add to what Dr. Garcia said, member Kleppa, the RF devices that do have FDA approval currently today, the ones that staff have seen specifically have that FDA approval for things like wrinkles, or more aesthetic dermatological uses. As Dr. Garcia said, they don't yet have a specific FDA approval or indication for use to treat dry eye or any other part of the visual system that would be part of the optometrist scope in California. So you can buy these RF devices on Amazon and other places for skincare and other more aesthetic dermatological uses. And Dr. Garcia said they are being used for the visual system in dry eye. They just don't yet have a specific indication for that use.
Thank you for that clarification. Does that mean that there are studies either being done or have been done which shows that RF is effective for eye treatment? I know, Dr. Garcia, you have some experience in this area. I'm wondering if there was a more generalized study done that confirmed its effectiveness in that area.
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's always like step one, is for there to be clinical trials to show that any technology is effective for what it's intended. So there are clinical trials that have already been done with RF. There's studies that have already been done for radiofrequency and dry eye. So those papers are already out there. The studies have already been done. It shows that it is effective, and I'm sure there's going to be more studies. So you know, that's the basis for the FDA process for some of these radiofrequency companies currently. So they are heading down that road. I would just say that, kind of like with IPL, you know, IPL before 2022 was widely used by optometrists and ophthalmologists for the treatment of dry eye, even before it got the FDA approval for the indication of dry eye. we're kind of following the same path that IPL followed. So it's just a matter of time. But I mean, I would, I know Greg is going to maybe talk a little bit more about that G2 option. I would suggest that we look at that and maybe take that to the full board and kind of flesh this out a little bit. Again, I think it's a safe technology. It's being used quite a bit already. We're a little bit behind the 8 ball in terms of addressing it, but there are a lot of optometrists treating dry eye with RF in California.
Dr. Garcia, just a kind of want to piggyback off of a question that member Kleppa asked too about the studies. There's studies that have indicated, I would imagine there's studies that are looking at RF both in use by itself and then also in combination with IPL. Do you have any experience with what those studies might say versus by itself versus in combination?
Yeah, so that's a good question too. So all these devices are effective on their own, IPL, low level light. There's a host of other ones and RF. They're all helpful. I've learned in doing dry treatment that if you have a grouping of technologies that work a little differently and use them together in a protocol, it's even more effective. So that's kind of what's happening now. You have practices that are already using low level light and already using intense pulse light, but wanting to get more success in treatment. So they're adding other technologies, and this is one radio frequency it's often added to a protocol that's already existing. So in our office, we have 3 technologies that we use for all of our MGT patients: IPL, low level light, and ThermoFlow. It's a thermal treatment. So this device potentially could take the place of another thermal treatment in a practice, or add that type of treatment.
Dr. Garcia, and I hate to put you on the spot, but you happen to be our expert in the room, so I appreciate your help on this.
Sure.
Based on your understanding of the state of the science and this particular technique, would you recommend that the board pursue a statutory regulatory change authorizing the use of RF, or do you feel that more study might be required?
Yeah, it's a good question. If you'd asked me that a year ago, I may not have had the same answer. But now knowing what I know about radio frequency, and a lot of my colleagues are using it safely, I would say we should head towards a regulatory or statutory change, because I think it is safe. I think it's effective, and it would just create a lot less confusion in the marketplace if we were to at least come out with some decision on radio frequency, whether we say it's not something that we can use, or let's make it okay to treat dry eye, and I think it is safe, and say, but you shouldn't be using it for aesthetic purposes. I think that would help a lot. If we authorize the use for this technology for dry eye, which is very effective, but aesthetics is one area that is currently definitely not within our treatment scope. So we could teach and educate our providers that are using RF that you don't want to market it as an aesthetic treatment. You don't want to promise any aesthetic effects. You want to treat your dry eye patients.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry if I missed it earlier, but I think you had said things are kind of, the FDA approval process, it might kind of be starting or on the way. And what do you have a rough estimate for how long that process would take?
Yeah, I've asked some of the manufacturers that question, and they're really hesitant to say, because there is no way for them to know. You just have to apply, do the clinical studies, and then the FDA process, can take several years, like it did for IPL. So it may be a while. It's certainly going to take at least a year or 2 from today.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking, I know the regulatory process could take a long time too. So, yeah.
I would say that just on that point, I think, with no disrespect to the federal government, I think in this area we would likely have the ability to be more nimble and quicker than they have shown themselves to be. As I said earlier, the IPL approval that when it finally came in February of 2021 was the first time in decades that the FDA had explicitly authorized a new ophthalmic device. Lots of approvals for indication for aesthetics or wrinkles or other things that aren't specific to the visual system. So they move a little slower. I think as Dr. Garcia also was suggesting, IPL had voluminous information and data and studies that were out there showing its utility and its safety and so on and so forth for years before the FDA finally acted in February 2021. So I don't know from a staff perspective if the same state of play exists for RF, if the same voluminous data, the same voluminous studies and so on and so forth is out there like it was for IPL. But I think as Dr. Garcia has been talking about, we're heading down that path, right? We're heading down that path. I would think, and again, staff doesn't know this because we don't have indication into FDA's process or what they may receive in terms of applications for new devices. But I would think that since IPL has been approved and since we know that manufacturers and others, not just in this state and around the country, are marketing the devices in tandem and in solo, that somebody has an application in with the FDA. That would be my guess, that somebody has one in with the FDA now, either for FDA approval for RF by itself or perhaps in combination with IPL or another device. That's what I would guess, but again, have no knowledge of that. Just basing that off of sort of the state of the marketplace and what's out there already. All of that is to say that at any moment, much like what happened in February 2021, the FDA could announce an approval for an RF device specific to an indication of the visual system. That could happen today, tomorrow, 10 years from now. And so we won't really know until that happens in terms of what the FDA does. That is the authority that exists in 3041A5G1. That is that authority for the FDA to indicate via an approval another device for the visual system. The other avenue is the G2, which we've talked a little bit about, and that is the authority for the board via regulation to determine via the regulation process that another medical device or technology has indication and use for the visual system. Again, the only prohibitions on any other device or technology would be that they cannot involve surgery, because optometrists, with very, very limited exception, are not authorized to perform surgery in California. And then again, if there's any manufacturer or training requirement that exists on that device or technology, we would have to apply that training requirement in our regulation as well. I guess the last thing I would say, and turn it back over to the committee for discussion and further conversation on this, is I think staff sort of views this as potentially two angles. One angle of this is the dry eye public outreach education aspect of this, right? Dry eye, as Dr. Garcia was mentioning, is prevalent. It's perhaps increasing as we use smartphones and laptops and other devices like that, where we may not be blinking as much compared to physical materials. So there may be a public education outreach opportunity with this issue, as well as the regulatory landscape that we've been talking about too.
Okay, my question, this is to the executive director. Looking at the memo, it looked like staff wasn't able to find the studies that Dr. Garcia was talking about, which have shown the efficacy of RF in practices where it's used. Nor do I see a discussion in the memo about whether this has been approved in other states. Would it be useful to us to gather that information maybe on the way to a possible regulatory approval?
Member Kleppa, while it's not included in the memo, I am personally aware of some of the studies that Dr. Garcia referenced. It would be no problem for staff to put that together in a subsequent memo for the full board. The other item would be more difficult. To survey the other 49 states in terms of their authority would be not as easy as finding and producing the studies. What I can share with you is if you are interested in sort of California ranks among the 50 states in terms of our scope of practice being the most advanced compared to the least advanced, there are about 18 other states that have in some way a more advanced scope of practice than what California has. Now that may look like things like RF, but more principally, it looks like things what we consider to be advanced procedures. So the ability to fire a laser, for example. No optometrist in California has that ability, but a lot of the other states have expanded their scope to do that. So if the committee wants that research, we could certainly do it, but it would take some time to sample all of the states to determine whether they have RF or not. Getting the studies together would be much easier to do, and we already have some of that information.
My thought would be you might want to turn to ARBO or one of the other organizations that may already have some of this information. Might give you a head start on where to look.
Yeah, I appreciate that suggestion. ARBO would sample all of the 50 states and wait for a response from them. I frequently engage with ARBO on these types of research topics and questions, and you'd probably not be surprised to know that a lot of the states never respond. The utility of the data, can be therefore questioned. But I'm happy to sample some of the bigger states, maybe Texas, New Jersey, New York, maybe some of the bigger licensee population states to see what they may have done or not done with respect to RF. I think that might be helpful. But sampling all of the states is going to take that's going to be a longer project.
I think your suggestion is a good one. A more limited survey may be useful. We just need at least one state, if it has been approved, to let us know what their experience has been. I think that might be a useful addition to our discussion.
Great. So does anyone else have any other questions or comments? Do we want to try to put together a motion to, for taking something to the board, or?
I'll take a stab at it with hopefully some friendly amendments or edits. I would like to request staff look into the possibility of pursuing a regulatory package regarding radio frequency, taking into account data that can be gathered with radio frequency use in other states and its efficacy and safety.
And I would agree with all of that, with the only addition being the studies that were referenced earlier. We gather the studies as well to help better inform our decision.
Sounds great.
Council, do we want to try to get that all down, locked and loaded?
Yeah. Can you just I could do that. I think I just need Member Garcia to just talk a little slower so I can type as he speaks.
Sure. See if I can remember what I said. To direct staff to look into pursuing a regulatory package for the use of radio frequency in California, taking into account other states that may have the technology in use with respect to safety and efficacy, and referencing studies with using radio frequency technology in dry eye.
As council is getting that all down, I think I'll say that's clear for me. One point of clarification would be, is this a recommendation to bring this information back to this committee or to bring it to the full board?
My opinion would be we would take it to the full board. That would better allow dissemination of the information, allow the board to evaluate the information, and if it's deemed sufficient, to move forward with a regulatory change.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I would agree with Member Kleppa.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
We're probably gonna have to restate this motion again.
Give me a second. I think I can just figure it out if or at least one that's close enough.
Okay. I typed it out too.
If you have it, feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, so the motion made by Dr. Garcia was to direct staff to look into pursuing a regulatory package for the use of radio frequency, taking into account other states that may have that technology in use with regards to safety and efficacy, and referencing studies using radio frequency technology on dry eyes to bring to the full board at a future time.
I think that works. Do you guys feel like that's clear for staff?
Yeah, I think it's very clear for me.
The only part you may want to switch in order is that I think Dr. Garcia wanted to be clear that it was only for use of radio frequency for dry eye, not for cosmetic purposes. So that I think the dry eye needs to be closer to the radio frequency. Other than that, I think it was perfect.
Sounds good.
I would, this is Executive Officer Prudent. That's a great suggestion, Member Kleppa. We could certainly add it. I would also point out that any regulatory proposal that we may pursue in this area would be under that authority of 3041A5, AF5 G2, and G2 specifically requires any regulation to be connected to the scope of practice. Aesthetics, wrinkles, so on and so forth are not part of the optometry scope of practice. So any regulatory proposal in this area would have to, sort of naturally by law, would have to be specific to the scope.
Correct.
Okay.
So yeah, I think staff is clear on that motion. We do not yet have a second, however.
Okay.
Also, to clarify, who made the motion for the record?
Dr. Garcia.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Dr. Garcia made the motion. Does anyone want to second the motion?
I'll do it if no one else wants to.
Oh, okay. Seconded by Kleppa. Okay. Should we open it up for public comment?
Yeah. Public comment. I'm Greg Pruden, Executive Officer in the publicly accessible location listed on the agenda. There are no members of the public located where I am.
Okay. Are there any comments from anybody else joining us over the phone?
This is the moderator. We are now taking public comment on the motion via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. As a reminder, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak, and I'll give you a 30-second warning before your time expires. We're going to take just a couple of seconds to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the motion?
Yes, please. Okay. So let's go ahead and move forward with the roll call vote. Let's see. Dr. Garcia?
I vote aye.
Member Kleppa?
Aye.
Member Sims?
Aye.
And Member Linden is an aye, so that motion passes. That was the last item on our agenda. So we are able to adjourn unless, if that's okay. Are we ready to adjourn?
I think so. This was a great committee meeting. This committee hasn't met in 2 years. So it was great that we could do this meeting. Staff really appreciates the feedback and the direction received from the committee today, and we look forward to working on these items.
Okay, sounds great. Okay, thanks
you,
everyone.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
This is the moderator. For those continuing on to the next meeting, we're just going to be silent until about noon. So we'll see you in half an hour.